Okay, after this Patanjali debacle, okay, with powers and all of this drama, I've decided, I'm going to put out there and I'm going to see if I can get through this, the Chandi pot. And this is what, basically this path is all about. You want to know what's the heart of this path? You want to understand what Kali, what Kundalini is all about. What's the reality of what's needed to get to realization? I'm going to read this text. If you had one text, this would be the text to have to understand this path, okay? And to understand what it's all about. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can get through this. This is kind of a long text, but it is so beneficial. But I'm not going to read all of the Sanskrit, everything. I'm just going to read the English translation of it because this is very long. I don't know if my voice will hold out to get through it, and excuse the coffee, but I'm going to need to get some refreshment along the way to keep me going with this. So this is about the meditation or the understanding. It's called jnanam, but understanding the meditation, understanding, sitting with the recognition of what this is. Okay, so this is about Durga, and then she compresses all of her energies into Kali, becoming Kali. Okay, so it's like Durga is a little bit more of a external manifestation, lighter version of Kali. Okay. You get to the very condensed version of it, then that would be Kali. Kali, which is time, which is essence, which is this energy. Okay, so here we go. This is from part of the Chandi pot. This is starting, if you have the Chandi pot, the version that I recommend for this path is the one by Swami Satyananda Saraswati. Okay, you can actually find this online if you put in Chandi pot by Swami Satyananda Saraswati. If you look for it online, you can find it. Okay, so here we go. She with the beautiful face, the destroyer of the great ego. Okay, so what's she there to do? To destroy ego. Not to play with it, not to prop it up. Okay? The Kundalini, the energy, is there to finally destroy ego. That ego, and when I say ego, what is ego? Ego is this feeling of being separate, an individualization of this energy, okay, with your storyline and your drama. Okay, so Kali is there, Kundalini is there to destroy, to go beyond the ego. Okay, so here we go. So I might give a little commentary as we go through this. Okay. So she with the beautiful face, the destroyer of the great ego, is seated upon the lotus of peace. In her hand she holds the rosary of alphabets. Now why does she hold a rosary of alphabets? Because all word is duality. Word brings these things into manifestation. The Word was with God, the Word was God. Why is it called God? Because it brings things into manifestation. Okay, so let's go forward. The battle axe of good actions, the club of articulation, the arrow of speech. Now these are all the things that she is using to fight. So these are the implements understand these are the implements, these are the weapons we use to go beyond ego. We use these on the path to get to realization. Okay? The thunderbolt of illumination, and that's why this path is called a thunderbolt path. The Vajra Nirvana mark, the thunderbolt way, the lightning way to realization. Okay, the path to Nirvana, Nibbana, being blown out. That is the name of this path. Okay. So, the lotus of peace, the bow of determination, the water pot of purification, the staff of discipline, energy, the sword of worship, the shield of faith, the conch of vibrations, the bell of continuous tone, the wine cup of joy, the pike of concentration, the net of unity, and the discus of revolving time, named excellent intuitive vision. I worship that great goddess of true wealth. In former times, the forces of peace and divinity had a dreadful encounter with the forces of thought, which continued for a full 100 years. The commander of the army of thought was the great ego. The leader of the army of clear perception was the rule of the pure. So let me say that again. I want you to understand this. The commander of the army of thought is ego. Okay. The army of the gods was vanquished by the very powerful thoughts. And all the gods being subdued, the great ego assumed the authority of the rule of the pure. Then the defeated gods, led by the lotus-born Lord of Being, went to where the supreme consciousness and the brilliance that pervades all were staying. The gods gave the narration of the exploits of the great ego at length, and told of their defeat by the forces of thought. The authority of the light of wisdom, the rule of the pure, the light of meditation, emancipation, devotion, the power that controls, the Lord of equilibrium, and other gods has been usurped by the great ego, and now he governs over all. That wicked ego has cast all of the gods from heaven, and now in the manner of men they wander about the earth. All that the thoughts have done has been reported to you. We have come for your protection. Now please think of the manner of their destruction. Then the slayer of too much and the bliss of being became enraged over the conduct of the thoughts, and their faces frowned in anger. And in excessive rage, a great light emanated from the face of he who holds the discus of revolving time, and from the creative capacity and the consciousness of infinite goodness as well. The rule of the pure, and all the other gods too, emanated great lights from their bodies, and all the lights united to form one light of radiant splendor. The gods saw that the great collection of light, like a blazing mountain that pervaded all the directions with its flames. There was nothing to compare with this light that emanated from the bodies of all the gods. And after collecting into one, it assumed a feminine form, whose illumination was apparent throughout the three worlds. From the light that had come from the source of bliss to existence, her face became manifested from the power that controls the hair from the consciousness that pervades all, her arms. From the light of devotion came her breasts, and from the light of the rule of the pure, her midsection. From the light of the Lord of equilibrium came her legs and thighs, and from the light of earth her buttocks and hips. From the light of the creative capacity came her feet, and from the light of radiance her toes. From the finders of wealth came her fingers, and from the guardian of treasure her nose. All of her teeth came from the Lord of being, and from the clarity of meditation her 3 eyes became apparent. From the light of the time of worship her eyebrows were manifested, and from desiring excellence her ears came into being, and all other gods too gave their lights to the formation of the energy of infinite goodness. Then the gods who were troubled by the great ego, seeing the grandeur of the goddess manifested from their united lights, experienced extreme joy. The bearer of the trident of unity took from his trident another trident and presented it to the goddess. Then the doer of all, taking from the discus of revolving time, manifested a second discus and bestowed it upon her. Equilibrium donated the conch of vibrations, and the light of meditation gave his energy. Emancipation gave his bow of determination and 2 quivers full of arrows. The rule of the pure, with 1,000 eyes, took from his thunderbolt of illumination a second thunderbolt and presented it to the goddess. And from his elephant, love for all, a bell of continuous tone, was donated. From the power that controls came the staff of discipline, and the Lord of equilibrium presented the net of unity. The Lord of being, a rosary of letters, and the creative capacity, the bowl of renunciation. The divine being of light filled the pores of her skin with rays of light and time, and gave the sword of worship and a brilliant shield. The ocean of pure thoughts gave a necklace of excellent gems and garments, which never lose their luster, and donated earrings, a divine crest, and bangles, and a halo of light. The radiant half-moon gave bracelets for her arms, anklets for her feet, a beautiful neck ornament, and rings of precious stones for her fingers, and the universal doer gave his extremely holy acts of good actions. All manner of weapons and impenetrable armor were presented to protect her head and breast from true wealth. A garland of lotuses was given that would never lose its luster. The sea presented a beautiful lotus, the blessings of peace, and the Himalayas gave the jewel of the lion of courage upon which to ride. The Lord of wealth gave a drinking vessel constantly full of intoxicating spirit, the ultimate. Lord of all serpents of energy by which the earth is sustained, gave great jewels that shine luminously in a necklace of serpents. Other gods too bestowed ornaments and weapons upon the goddess. After being worshipped again and again, she laughed, and she roared in a high voice, and her dreadful sound resounded through the ethers. The goddess caused such an excessive noise that caused all the worlds to quake and the oceans to rage. The earth rocked, and the mountains shook, and the gods were extremely pleased and joyfully cried out to the lion rider, "Victory be yours!" And with great satisfaction, the wise people praised the image of their worship, bowing with devotion, seeing 3 worlds in such commotion. The army of thoughts adorned their armor, and took up their weapons and stood together. The great ego, in excessive anger, exclaimed, "Ah, what is this?" Then, along with all the thoughts that had assembled ready to attack, he ran towards that ultimate sound and saw the goddess illuminating the three worlds. Her feet stood upon the earth, and her crown touched the furthest reaches of the atmosphere. The twang of her bowstring sent fear through the 7 regions of hell, and the 1,000 arms of this goddess covered all the directions. And then began the battle between the goddess and the thoughts. Okay, so we are just coming to the start. But this is what the path is about. The path is about stilling the mind, to go beyond ego, to get to that moksha, that place of liberation. Okay, I'm going to, let me see how much time we're, okay. I'm going to try to cut this up in pieces, because if I read the whole thing, we're going to be maybe hour, a couple of hours or so. So I will probably cut this up in segments. So on we go. Many kinds of weapons illuminated the entire atmosphere in flight, and a very powerful general of the great ego, devoid of clear understanding, rose to do battle. Fickleness wages battle with his 4 divisions of horses, elephants, chariots, and infantry of great strength, and haughtiness joined in the fray with 60,000 chariots. With hundreds of thousands, the great deceiver, and with his army of 10 million foot soldiers, want of resolution, a great thought came into the battle. With 6 million soldiers, memories entered the battlefield, and with thousands of elephants and horses wandering to and fro. Hypocrisy joined in the fighting, with 5,000 million chariots assembled, and moreover tens of thousands of great thoughts on elephants and horses. Wandering to and fro, fought on in that battle with his chariots racing about, and others too continued to fight. Their chariots and elephants kept coming. The great thoughts fought and fought in that battle with the goddess. Uncountable thousands of warriors and chariots, horses and elephants accumulated there. The great ego himself joined in the battle with his large javelin, his small javelin, his energy, and his mace. Other thoughts fought and fought in that battle and tried to strike the goddess with their swords, with all of their energies, and to bind her with their nets. They were trying to kill the goddess with their swords. And the goddess, she who tears apart thought, attacked them with her own weapons. Playfully the goddess rained upon her attackers a shower of her own weapons and mantras, which cut all their weapons to pieces, while gods and seers praised her with hymns and minds of divinity. In her face was not the slightest exertion, as the Empress of the universe hurled weapon after weapon upon the bodies of the attackers, and the lion of the goddess, shaking its mane in rage, strolled through the army of thoughts like a forest conflagration. Each expiration of the breath of the Mother of the universe manifested there as her army, numbering in hundreds and thousands, fighting in the battle with the axe, javelin, sword, and spear. The great thoughts fought and fought in that battle with the goddess. Uncontrollable thousands of warriors and chariots and elephants accumulated there. The goddess and her immense energy destroyed numbers of thoughts while beating on the drum and sounding the conch, playing cymbals and swinging the club and trident and raining energy in that festival of battle. The terrible noise of her bell stunned the great thoughts to unconsciousness. While she cut them with her sword, how many thousands fell to their death? Many thoughts were bound by the net and dragged to the earth, and many thoughts were cut into two by the sharp edge of her sword. How many thoughts fell, wounded to the earth from the impact of the club? How many were struck by the mace and became extremely injured? Some thoughts, pierced in the breast by the pike, fell to the earth in a heap. How many thoughts in that battlefield, struck by a rain of arrows, were cut apart? Several of the number of thoughts who had tormented the gods relinquished their vital breath. Many others lost their arms or necks and were reduced to dust. How many fell with their heads cut? How many their bodies divided at the midsection? Many cut from the hips fell. Many lost a limb or an eye or were torn into two pieces. Many thoughts with their heads severed rose again as headless bodies in a terrible form to take up their arms and continue to battle with the goddess. Other headless torsos danced to the rhythm of music of the battle, and many without heads raced about their swords and energies and other weapons and shouted at the goddess, "Stop! Stop!" Where that terrible encounter took place, the earth was covered with chariots, elephants, horses, and thoughts that the goddess had caused to fall, so that there was no possibility to find a path by which to come and go. From the army of thoughts into their elephants and horses poured forth so much blood as to create a great river. Within an instant that gigantic army of thoughts perished before the Mother of the universe, just as grass and timber are reduced to ashes in the moment of a great fire. And that lion, shaking its mane to and fro, roaring loudly, extracted the life force from many thoughts. Thus the goddess and her army waged battle with the multitude of the great thoughts, as gods in heaven were extremely joyous and showered the earth with flowers. Om. Chapter 3. The radiant body of the Mother of the universe has the magnificence of 1,000 rising suns. She's draped in a sari of red silk. Around her neck is a garland of red skulls. Her two breasts have been colored with red sandal paste. In her 4 lotus-like hands she holds a rosary and shows the mudras of knowledge, fearlessness, and granting of boons. Her 3 eyes are shining, and her bud-like mouth is extremely beautiful. Upon her head sits a crown of jewels in which the moon is situated, and she is resting upon a lotus seat. With unlimited devotion I bow to this goddess. When the great thoughts saw their forces being destroyed, that heroic general, devoid of clear understanding, in great anger, proceeded to battle with the Mother of the universe. That thought rained upon the goddess a cloud of the arrows of various doubts, as plentiful as the waters that fall from a cloud upon Mount Meru. Then the goddess fired such a multitude of arrows that cut his arrows into pieces, and also killed his horses and his charioteer. With this she also cut his bow and his exceedingly high banner. After cutting his bow, she pierced his body with her arrows. Losing his bow, chariot, horses, and charioteer, that thought took up his sword and shield and ran after the goddess. With the sharp edge of his sword he struck the lion on the head, and with great speed he gave a great blow to the goddess on her left arm. When that sword touched her body, it broke into pieces, and that angry thought of many considerations took a pike in his hands. And that great thought threw that glaring pike at the excellent one beyond time, just as the sun fills the heavens with dazzling luster. When the goddess saw the pike coming at her, she too let loose her pike, which split his weapon into numerous pieces, and devoid of clear understanding, gave up his life. After the death of that valiant general in the army of the great ego, devoid of clear understanding, who had been the source of affliction to many gods, fickleness approached, mounted on an elephant. He attacked the goddess from above with his energy, but the mother of the universe, with the shout of her mantra, Hum, wounded him and deprived him of light, and the energy fell to the earth. When he found that his energy was broken, fickleness became intensely angry. Now he threw his pike at her, but the goddess cut it with her arrows. In all of this, the lion of the goddess jumped upon the head of the elephant and began an intensive battle with that thought. Those two fought, and the elephant fell to the ground. Then they rose in excessive rage and began to fight again with fierce blows. Thereafter, with great speed, the lion leapt into the atmosphere and, falling from the sky, severed the head of fickleness from his body. Haughtiness was slain by the goddess with stones and trees in that battlefield, and striking with his paws and biting with his teeth, the lion brought down disbelief. Striking angrily with her club, the goddess reduced arrogance to powder. Memories was cut by the sword, and anxiety and blindness by her arrows. Violent temper and passion, and the great deceiver too, were slain by the three-eyed seer of all. Hypocrisy's head was cut by the sword, and irresistible temptation and foul mouth were both sent to the kingdom of death by her arrows. Seeing his army thus being destroyed, the great ego assumed the form of a buffalo, and he himself began to terrify the troops of the goddess. Sometimes he fought with his snout, sometimes kicking with his hooves into the air, and sometimes hitting with his tail, sometimes whirling around while ripping with his horns, where at great speed, a great war cry, his breath puffing in exertion, he scattered the troops all over the ground. Having laid low the troops of her army, that thought advanced to kill the lion of the goddess. Then the mother of the universe became very angry. That great evil one, that great ego, also became very angry. He kicked the earth with his hooves and raised large mountains with his horns, and he threw them aside as he roared. And with the great speed of this thought, the earth split in fear. His tail lashed at the sea of desire, causing the waters to flood the earth. Tossing about his horns, he dashed and he split the clouds into pieces, and he cast up by the violent speed of his breath. Winds and mountains fell from the sky. And waging battle, in his great anger, the great thought advanced towards her, while she who tears apart thought assumed anger and prepared to slay him. Throwing her net, she bound that great thought. After being bound in that great encounter, he left his form as a buffalo. Thereafter, he manifested the form of a lion. In this condition, the mother of the universe was prepared to cut off his head, but somehow he changed his form again to that of a man bearing a sword. Then the goddess instantly rained upon him a shower of arrows with sword and shield, and she was ready to pierce him. Just then he took the form of the king of elephants. With his trunk he began to pull the huge lion of the goddess to roar, but as he was pulling, she cut the trunk with her sword. Then that great thought again wore the body of a buffalo, and in the manner as before him, with the inhalation and exhalation of his breath, he shook the three worlds with all that moves and moves not. In great rage, the mother of the perceivable world, she who tears apart thought, again and again drank an excellent spirit, and with red eyes began to laugh. There, in the strength and boldness of that wild ecstasy, that evil demon roared, and with his horns threw mountains at she who tears apart thought. She began to pulverize those mountains with her arrows of speech. Speaking in the ecstasy of spirit, her mouth became red and her tongue was stuttering. The goddess said, "Roar and roar, you fool! For as long as I drink this spirit, roar so much as you like, and your death is in my hands. And when I have finished drinking, soon the gods will be roaring." Thus speaking, the goddess leaped and ascended above that great thought. Pressing down upon him and holding him with her foot, she struck him in the throat with her pike. And the great ego again, hit by the foot of the goddess, changed his form from his mouth, but was able to free only half of his body. And with her great strength, the goddess restrained that as well. Even with the half of his body coming out, the great thought waged battle with the goddess. Then the goddess cut off his head with a great double-edged sword. Shrieking and crying, the remaining thoughts of that army ran away, and all the gods became exceedingly joyous. In great satisfaction, the gods joined the great seers in hymns of praise to the goddess, while the celestial chorus and nymphs sang and danced with joy. Om. So I'm going to close out this section and we will go on to chapter 4 in the next video. And again, this is what the path is about. The path is about going beyond ego, going beyond these thoughts, these mentations, these ideologies, these false things, false powers, false dramas. And this is why I say, you see those that degrade into such foulness, such negativity, such drama, that is not of the place of light. Okay? So do not confuse what is truth and worship darkness as light. Okay? So namaste. I hope you've enjoyed this. And we will continue forward in the next video, onwards to part 2.